Hey guys, tonight we venture gently back in time, stepping softly into the quietly peculiar streets and cozy corners